Hey there, Ernie here. So, after the numbers are in and Rogue One, a Star Wars story has pulled in $155 million in change over the weekend and almost 300 million worldwide. So obviously these spin-offs and standalones are going to be a resounding success financially. Now this is going to be my spoiler review. Yes, spoiler review. If you want to see my spoiler-free review, hit that button right up here. And that'll take you to my deeper thoughts, I guess you could say, about while skirting the issues of spoilers. Now, I gave Rogue One, a Star Wars story, 3 stars out of 5. I have not had the opportunity yet to see it again, so maybe my opinion would change. I'm not entirely sure if it will or not. But now that I'm guessing that most people have seen Rogue One, we can dive into the spoilers. Now, one of the issues I brought up in my spoiler-free review was that the problems of that being a prequel to a film with some well-established historical moments, it can rob a film of any kind of suspense. So because you kind of know where everything's going. As I cited the example of the prequels, where we knew this is the story of Anakin. We know at some point he's got to make a turn and turn to the dark side. Then he's got to become Darth Vader, and we know how Darth Vader turns out because we've seen episodes 4, 5, and 6. So Rogue One takes its story literally from the opening crawl of Episode 4, New Hope, where just the first 2 paragraphs describe well, maybe even 3, considering how Rogue One ended. How a battle occurred where the rebellion was victorious against the Empire, and during that battle they managed to steal the plans to the Death Star. And Princess Leia is in possession of those plans, is now en route to Alderaan, and is trying to evade the pursuit by the Imperial forces, which are being led by Darth Vader. So that's basically where the impetus of this story comes from. Rogue One is the first in the initially what was called the Star Wars anthology films, and now they're just Star Wars stories. I kind of prefer the former title. And it basically follows the band of rebel spies who were able to infiltrate the Empire and grab those plans and get out of there and get the plans to where they needed to go. So the problem with foreknowledge of events, there really is no mention whatsoever of what occurred in this battle. So it was, as I mentioned, it was safe to presume that a lot of these people that were on this mission are gone, dead, killed in action most likely. And I expected that there's going to be a lot of deaths, and I thought going in, this is going to be really screwed up because it's like, that a lot of these people aren't going to make it out alive. And that was kind of like, wow, that's dark. And for all intents and purposes, I was right. But I did not expect to have very little emotional connection to any of these characters, that when they all start dying, I didn't feel anything. I was like, It's like, oh well, they're dying. They're dead. Nope, they're dead. I mean, literally, I expected a lot of people to die, but I did not expect everyone that was involved in this mission, essentially on both sides, on the Empire and in the Rebellion, were basically killed off. So, because that was expected, and it did do that, there was a lack of suspense on what was going to happen. So I was hoping that the film, which was written by Chris Weitz and Tony Gilroy, would actually, in their short time, be able to establish some sort of emotional connection to these characters. Because I know we're only going to have a short time. And I cited the example of Star Wars Rebels, the great animated series on Disney XD, where Star Wars Rebels essentially takes place in roughly the same time period as this film. And in a few episodes, in season 1, they really establish who these characters were and who they are, and they actually were quite endearing. I really got behind these characters in a matter of episodes. It's like, and it's not like Clone Wars, where I already knew who Anakin and Obi-Wan and Ahsoka were, and I knew who Maul and Sidious and all the other people who involved who show up in Clone Wars. I knew who they were, so I got their backstory. But Rebels was left on, it was basically just, they had to create these characters from scratch, and they were established quite well, and I totally got into these characters, and now it's in its third season, and the show it's really good. So I would hope that in Rogue One that they would be able to pull that off as well, but alas, they did not. And really, we didn't spend, even with the major characters as played by Felicity Jones and Diego Luna, we really don't get enough of the backstory. It's almost like they were hoping for audience sympathy because of Jyn losing her father Galen to the Empire, who was basically essentially kidnapped, and had her again. I'm saying this is a spoiler review, and her mother was killed in the beginning of the film. So I guess that's almost like a forced sympathy, forced empathy. But after that, it really, okay, yeah, she's trying to save her father, gets back to her father, but I really felt I wasn't that compelled by her plight and her mission, her personal mission. Not so much the mission for the rebellion, but I really, it's kind of flat. Galen, as played by Mads Mikkelsen, is fine, and even when they do reunite and he dies, it's just like, it's like, oh, all right, I kind of expected that. So, and there were a lot of elements that obviously were tied into the first, episode 4, I should say, which technically is the first, and answering a lot of questions about where the plans came from, how the flaw was exposed, who exactly was the ones that went and got the Death Star plans, and how this rebellion came together, how these rebel spies came together. And like I said, I guess in Star Wars Rebels, that's essentially the same route that they took, and it was better established in there. But then they had a long time to do it. Here, they only had maybe 30 minutes or so to set up these characters. And one of the characters that really, for me, just felt out of place was Forest Whitaker's Saw Gerrera. They really did not do enough to establish who this guy is and why is he important in the Star Wars franchise. Saw Gerrera is a character that appeared in Star Wars Clone Wars, the six-season series that was on Disney, then was finished up on Netflix. I did not go back to watch the Saw Gerrera story arc. I think it was like a 3-episode arc to find out, to refresh myself on what his origins were and where he ended up in that one. But here it's part of the reason why the first half of the film really drags. And it's almost like there was no need for Saw Gerrera. I mean, the plot point that was needed to move along the story could have been achieved in another way without bringing him in, because it felt like it was like just drawn out of like, who is this guy? It's like I feel no, like, is he a villain? Is he good, bad, what? It's like you're just there. It's just some random character of no importance. So it's a wasted opportunity with having Forest Whitaker in there. It was almost like Max von Sydow in Force Awakens, where he's like, oh my god, Max Sydow's in a Star Wars movie. This should be great. He didn't do much of anything at all, and dies in the first 5 minutes. So getting past that was my main problems with Rogue One. Is one, the suffering from prequelitis, and lack of suspension tension, and secondly was the lack of emotional connection to these characters, which I really think would have. I mean, imagine if Rogue One turns out it was the conclusion to the Star Wars Rebels series, and these characters are actually those rebels that we were all getting into, and had it concluded the way the film does, I'd be like, oh my god, I'm devastated, because I love these characters. Now, it's like, it would have been like shocking to see all these characters go down that I really like, and I mean, they were established, and now we're going to be seeing them all die, and I see the sacrifice. The sacrifice would have had more weight for me if it was with established characters that I could totally get behind, but alas, it was not. So those are the two really big problems with the movie for me, and hence the 3 stars. Well, probably if this wasn't a Star Wars film and was just left as it was, this probably would have only managed 2.5 stars out of me. But it only gets a 3 stars because of the second half, or the film, or roughly maybe the third act of the film, where they go to the planet Scarif, which is where the planet they have to go to attain the Death Star plans. Now, there's a lot of activity going on, a lot of action going on, but it wasn't necessarily exciting for me. There was a lot of it was telegraphed, but there was a lot of cool stuff that went on in this battle. And then there was a battle on land, sea, and air, and outer space. So it was roughly a very engaging and large scale assault and battle that was like I said, it didn't blow me away, but it was still involving and engaging enough that it's like I wanted to see how it all turned out. There were some beats that were just a little heavy-handed in regards to some characters and their telegraphing of their death scenes, and it got a little schmaltzy and melodramatic. And again, when these characters start dying, I'm like, it's like no big deal. But and again, I had no idea that they were going to totally dispatch everybody involved, and in the end, it was just like, oh well. I didn't feel much of anything. So you got to wonder just how exactly it sounded like I'm a total downer on this. This should have been like a 2-star thing, but it's nowhere near as bad as the Phantom Menace or Attack of the Clones. Nowhere near. And it's engaging enough in the second half to make up for the first half, but not enough to really elevate it enough to make me overlook all the problematic elements of the story and execution. But, I mean, the performances are fine across the board, except maybe the Forrest Whitaker one, because it felt like they didn't know what the hell they were doing with that character. But other elements that really, really stood out were the reappearances of Peter Cushing and Carrie Fisher as their characters, Grand Moff Tarkin and Princess Leia Organa. Great CGI work basically brought these actors, well, Peter Cushing in particular brought him back to life. And there were times, I saw this in 3D, so there were times where, yeah, you could tell it was CJ, but then there were times with just the right lighting, it looked like Peter Cushing was back. I like what they did with the character and how he was really pulling the strings in the background. And the drama that was going on between him and Mendelsohn's character, Krennic, I think what his character's name was. And then there was Vader himself. Now, Vader makes 2 rather significant scenes, appears in 2 significant scenes. One in a temple on Mustafar, I believe it was, and which looks exactly like production artwork from the 70s. And then another one where we get to see the evil of Vader, where he basically just takes down a whole bunch of humans in a hallway as he's trying to go after the Death Star plans. Now, I heard a lot of people say, it's like, oh my god, that was great, that was like terrifying, that was whatnot, but they did that in Star Wars Rebels, where he faced off with 2, not Jedis, but he faced off with Ezra and Kanan, and it was a great fight between the 3 of them, and you really got to see Vader in his prime using his Jedi skills against other pseudo Jedi. And I thought, wow, I can't imagine how this is going to look in live action, because we never really see Vader in his prime in any of the films, including in New Hope, Empire, and Jedi, but where he could really just go all out. And he does kind of go all out in this hallway scene where he's just like dispatching people with the Force and like slicing through people with their lightsabers. But I'm like thinking, it's like, yeah, I guess that was cool, but it had no wow factor for me, because I've seen it done better before in an animated series. So that scene didn't have that much impact on me. And then the film literally ends seconds before, I guess moments before the beginning of episode 4, where they get the plans to Princess Leia, who is an actress, and has a young Leia's face like mapped on her, and I believe Carrie Fisher came back and did the voice, and totally ties in right into episode 4. Now, because this is a prequel, and it's tied into a highly regarded previous film, there obviously was going to be a lot of Easter eggs scattered throughout this movie. The Easter eggs were expected, so when they were coming up, it was like, oh yeah, that was cool. Oh, I like how that worked out. That was a nice tie-in. And then there were other moments that felt like George Lucas had his hands on it that were just like, kind of like Easter eggs that just make you roll your eyes, like Boba Fett's insertion into the special edition of A New Hope. You're like, oh, come on. Here we have like Jen has an encounter with Walrus Man, and the other guy, the one that Obi-Wan cuts the arm off of in the cantina scene on Tatooine. And I would like think it's like, oh, come on, that's too much. And then the insertion of R2 and 3PO was just like, really, did we need that? That was just too much fan service. And then that one just raised a rather interesting plot point for me, is because in the scene, 3PO is whining about, why is everyone going to Scarif? No one Scarif, the planet where the Death Star plans are. Why is everyone going to Scarif? Nobody told us. Everybody's rushing around and taking off in their ships to get the Scarif. And they're like, where's everybody going? How come nobody told us? What are we doing? And then later on in the film, we find out the blockade runner that they're on is in one of the ships that's on its way to Scarif. So, did we miss something? Did everybody just stop the launches so they can make sure these two droids are on the blockade runner? Did Bail Organa or Princess Leia's like, oh yeah, by the way, make sure my droids are on the ship before I leave? It's almost like they need their own special edition now to hit, like Lucas did with Empire Strikes Back when he didn't think that people would understand how Vader suddenly got to his Star Destroyer, so he inserted this scene. He said, "Bring me my Star Destroyer." I'm like, did we really need that? To figure that out. So now it feels like they need that moment for a special edition of Rogue One, so they can have Leia's like, "Bring me my protocol droids," and yeah, so stuff like that. There were like little Easter eggs that I really liked. There was in one scene there was a call out over the PA where they call General Sandula or whatever it was, please report to so and so. And I remember that bouncing in my head, I was like, that name sounds familiar. And I looked it up, and it turns out it was Hera from Rebels. So at least now we know Hera at least makes it to the timeline in Episode 4, New Hope. And then other little Easter eggs apparently were scattered throughout, like how Red 5 dies, so that Luke Skywalker gets that call sign Red 5. Then there were other little things scattered throughout the film, and but overall, it just didn't have as much of that impact because, like I said, the lack of the emotional connection and the lack of suspense and tension because of it being a prequel. So so basically, in the end, I'm glad they made it. I'm glad it turned out I mean, I would have loved if it was better. At least for me, it would have been better. I mean, it was good, it was okay, but at least I know that with some work, these standalone anthology films can actually be great, and I'm really looking forward to all the other possible avenues that they can take, like to do with like the alleged Obi-Wan trilogy, or a standalone Vader film, or a standalone Yoda film. Or for me personally, I would love it if they go back in time and do like an old Knights of the Old Republic trilogy or something. And let's see what they can do with that, because like I said, once we get the Han Solo film, then we got Episode 9, and it's a totally clean slate. What are they going to do next? So Rogue One was, yes, a disappointment, but it's Star Wars. I enjoyed it for what it was. I didn't get out of it as much as I wanted, but it's not like Phantom Menace or Attack of the Clones where I don't really feel like watching them again, or like Phantom Menace I can't really watch again. Attack of the Clones I can have on in the background, not really pay much attention, and just watch the parts I liked. But Rogue One, yeah, it's a diverting entertainment, but like I said, it's just not up to snuff for what the rest of the Star Wars franchise is. So 3 stars out of 5. So if you like the spoiler review, hit that like button below. So have you seen Rogue One? Now that this is the spoiler review, you can comment away and say what you will. So please comment below and let me know your thoughts. And If you haven't already subscribed to my channel, please do so you can stay on top of my new reviews, retro reviews, trailer reactions, and any other fun things I happen to put up on my channel. So until next time, my friends, may the Force be with you.